welcome our speakers, Alana and Jack. They're going to talk about Highway Crowsnest Pass functional planning study. Alana needs no introduction, actually. Alana is responsible for leading ISL Calgary's transportation team. Recently, she's been appointed as the board of directors. Congratulations, Alana. She has vast experience from the States and here have been in the Valley in Calgary for many years now. Jack from Saskatoon, he came to Calgary in 2006 and has been designing roads ever since. Exciting news for Jack. He is going to expect a baby anytime now. So if he does leave the meeting in the middle, understand why. With that, I will turn it to you, Alana, to kickstart your presentation.
Great. Thank you for having us. We do have a pre-recorded video a la TAC format that Jack re-recorded for today's presentation. So through the logistical pieces, we figured out that I was going to share my screen. So I'm setting that up. And both Jack and I are here to answer all of your questions at the end.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to my presentation, A Bird's Eye View of Crowsnest Pass. So everyone says you need to have an outline of your presentation. I don't really agree, but here's my outline. I'm going to tell you about this project, and after I'm done, you ask me some awesome questions. So this is Crowsnest Highway. It is kind of the southerly route through the Rocky Mountains. It goes from Hope in British Columbia to Medicine Hat here in Alberta. And both in Alberta and BC, it's referred to as the Crowsnest Highway because it goes through Crowsnest Pass. And it's got some pretty cool trailblazers of crows in their nests. So we're not talking about the entire Crowsnest Highway. We're just talking about one short little 50-kilometer long piece of it in the extreme southwest corner of Alberta. And that's where it is. So here's the project area in a little more detail. Going from right to left, kind of the part highlighted in yellow is generally in flat, open prairie, or at least somewhat flat, somewhat open prairie. And once you get into the orange, it starts getting a lot more mountainous and challenging. That's where we'll spend most of our time in this presentation. So the orange part is generally through the municipality of Crowsnest Pass. This is a special municipality that was kind of amalgamated in 1979. It was kind of Coleman, Blairmore, Frank, Bellevue, and Hillcrest all kind of came together and became one municipality. At the time, it had a total population of about 7,300 people. And it hasn't really been growing. In fact, it's been going the other way, and it's now down to about 5,500 people. But traffic volumes on the highway have been steadily increasing, which is how this project kind of came about. So because it's part of the National Highway System, Alberta Transportation has it designated as a future 4-lane freeway. Now, if you know anything about this highway right now, it's all 2 lanes. So you know, there's a long way to go before we have a 4-lane freeway through here. But basically what they wanted us to do was to develop an ultimate functional plan for that, you know, long-term future when it's a 4-lane freeway. We came up with 110 kilometer per hour design speed. That's as high as you can go without having some big changes to the existing alignment. We've got 7 interchanges and 1 flyover designated as kind of future access across and to and from the highway, which is going to take a lot of service roads to accomplish because there's a lot more than 8 intersections through this 50 kilometers of highway at the moment. So there's going to be some major access management challenges involved with that. But then the big thing too was Alberta Transportation wants to kind of know what their ultimate property requirements are, and this plan basically did that. But you know, I'm not going to talk too much about the freeway plan because it's a long way off. But what might happen in the somewhat near to medium future is kind of the interim functional plan of twinning portions of this highway and doing some reasonable access management, not kind of the full freeway-ification, but definitely consolidating some accesses. So that's what I'll focus most of the presentation on, is the interim functional plan. There were a lot of other kind of non-highway design components of the project. I'll maybe touch on a couple of them, but public engagement was a big one between local residents and politicians and officials. There was a big historical resources component. There was a hydrotechnical and stormwater management component, as you'd expect. There was a good study of wildlife accommodation needed through here. We'll touch on that later in the presentation. And there was some preliminary design of bridges and, where necessary, walls. So this project is really kind of defined by the 3 R's: road, river, and rail. There's the road in red. There's the river in blue. That's the Crowsnest River. And there's the CP Rail main line in yellow. And so they all basically follow the valley through here, and they're all kind of very close to each other, and really kind of drove a lot of design decisions, especially the CP Rail throughout the project. So the existing highway is basically only 2 lanes. There's really not a lot of passing lanes on here to speak of. Just some kind of minor, acceleration lanes at a couple of intersections, but that's really about it. It's 2 lanes. The only exception is in that area circled in purple. There's some climbing lanes there. It's pretty steep going down to the bridge crossing the Old Man River there, at the Old Man River Dam. Now, if you've driven through here before too, you might also know that the winds through here are infamously strong, and it's not uncommon for trucks to blow off the highway. This is kind of more along Highway 22, where you'll see signs like this, but certainly it was a consideration on Highway 3 as well. You also might think, it's like, Jack, that sign doesn't look all that big. Don't you think you want to make it a little bigger so you can see it when you're driving down the highway? That text can't be more than 200 mils high or something. It's probably a lot smaller. But I mean, I guess the bigger you make the sign, the more susceptible it is to catching those winds. So they got to keep it small. So let's just take a look at the existing wildlife collisions along the project area. And you can see there's some real hot spots here. The purple hatching and shading is kind of where there's known wildlife migration patterns, and they really correspond with high carcass density on the highway from what we found. Lots of animal vehicle collisions through there. All right, so let's look at the project stages. So there's 3 distinct portions of this project, and I'm calling them A, B, and C. For the purposes of this presentation, we had much more complicated names when we were actually doing the project. But stage A is the realignment around Coleman, and starts basically at the west end of the project limit and goes to Blairmore. It's about 10 kilometers long. And so that's completely new construction and building the new highway around Coleman. Stage B is very constrained, mountainous, the most challenging parts of the project from a design perspective, and it's all being twinned on the existing alignment. There's no major realignments. And stage C is once we kind of get out of the mountains, it's a little flatter, a little more space, and just more wide open. Okay, so let's start by looking at stage C. As I said, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this stage, so let's get it out of the way. So you can see that the level of service is pretty good. The AEDTs are pretty low, and the one major collision-prone location, I think is fair to say, is at that Highway 22 intersection. And just kind of given the traffic patterns around here, there's really kind of a dominant movement between Highway 22 and the west leg of Highway 3. And the east leg of Highway 3, the volumes drop pretty dramatically, and they're still a long way away from needing to be twinned. So here's the cross-section for Stage C. It's basically Alberta Transportation's platonic ideal of a twinned highway. 40-meter center-to-center spacing of the carriageways for kind of that result median width 32.6. Lots of space, nice gentle 6-to-1 side slopes, nice wide shoulders both inside and out, and 4 driving lanes. And this is kind of boring. There's nothing really special or innovative about it. It's just a twinned highway, so not a whole lot more to say. So here's our recommended plan for Stage C. There's just a couple things that I want to touch on, and then we'll move on to the other stages. But there's a vehicle inspection station just east of Highway 507. And so that can kind of stay while the highway is twinned, but as soon as you have to build an interchange at Highway 507, that vehicle inspection station really gets in the way. So we got to shift it about 2 kilometers down the road to that wide space in the median we've created and put it right there. The other hotspot that I mentioned is the Highway 22 intersection. And so to cool that hotspot off, you need a roundabout to manage traffic volumes there. And the other major feature of this part is the Cowley realignment. So you'll see that the village of Cowley is right up against the highway. There's really not a lot of space to put an interchange in there in the future. And so we had to realign the highway around Cowley so that once you have an interchange there in the future, then you've got space from the interchange junction. So here's stages A and B, and you'll notice that most of stage C was solidly in that kind of level of service C. And most of stages A and B are firmly in that D and E, and there's a lot more collision-prone locations. And that's mostly a result of a whole lot more traffic. You'll see we get up almost to 10,000 vehicles a day on average between Frank and Blairmore. And that starts really getting into, we're going to have to start thinking about twinning this pretty soon. That's the average throughout the year. But, if you've ever driven out to Fernie on a ski weekend, you'll know that that's kind of highly seasonally variable. And, in the summer and during ski season, that average daily traffic can be a lot higher in those periods. And so that can lead to a lot of problems when there's not a lot of opportunities to pass. The other thing here is the speed limits. And so, whenever I drive through here, I never know what the speed limit is. It's hard to keep track. You're coming in from BC, you're going along at 100. Okay, not too bad. Going good, going good. Coleman, whoa, 60, got to slow down to 60. And it's like, oh, get a little further into Coleman, oh, down to 50. Okay. And then, back up to 80. Okay, going along, going around Blairmore, coming into Frank. Oh, 60. Ooh, okay, slow down. Oh, back up to 100. Back down to 80 through Bellevue, and then once you get past the Bellevue intersection, you're back up to 100. So not exactly, harmonious speed profile there, and really hard for drivers to, remember what the speed limit is and drive accordingly. So let's look at stage B. So here is kind of the quintessential problem of stage B. We have a mine and a big rock cut on the north side. And on the south side, we have more rocks, some sloping, and the CP rail. And, it looks like we've got a fair bit of space. Like, yeah, we could probably widen to the south, stay away from that mine. It's kind of a tourist attraction. There's some geotechnical challenges with, blasting rock away right where there's, it's dug out for a mine. But there's the property line for CP rail, that fence line right there. And, it kind of became apparent to us pretty early on in the design process that all of stage B, really needs to be, you hold the existing edge of pavement of the highway on the south, and you widen all to the north. because anytime you start going to the south, you start, having to slope onto CP land, and they don't like that. That just opens a whole other set of challenges that we really weren't prepared to deal with. So the cross section for Stage B was inspired mostly by what I like to call the Okanagan Special. And so this is the cross section that kind of most of the new twinning in British Columbia in these kind of mountainous regions has been in the last 15, 20 years. All the twinning they've done is pretty much this Okanagan Special. So they've got nice wide shoulders, 2 driving lanes each direction, and a flush median. And now their median is 2.6 meters wide, intended to accommodate a 0.6 meter wide median barrier with 1 meter inside shoulders. So inspired by the Okanagan Special, this is the cross section that we've got for Stage B. And it's pretty much the same, just with a much wider median. Instead of 2.6, we're at full 6 meter wide flush median. The one major difference that I'll highlight here is a high tension cable barrier down the middle rather than concrete median barrier. Local officials and maintenance people were pretty wary about, putting concrete barrier down the middle. They were very concerned about snow drifts and all the kind of the high winds and stuff that the area is famous for. And so that's how we wound up with high tension cable barrier. So Frank's Slide, if you remember anything about driving through this part of the province, you will remember Frank's Slide because it looks like the moon. So in 1903, this is Turtle Mountain. Good chunk of it collapsed and buried Frank and everything around it in 100 million tons of rock. And based on the reports, 70 to 90 people died. It covered the river, it covered the highway, it covered the railway that was there at the time. And they're still there now. You can see them. This is the debris field. And there's Highway 3 going right through it. So this is what it looks like from dashboard level or Google Street View car level. And as you can see, it's rock and more rock, and not a whole lot else. And you've got the ever-present CP rail on the south side, and not a lot you can do here. And in addition to just the logistical challenge of moving all this rock to twin a highway through here, getting a contractor to move all this rock is not going to be easy or cheap. In addition to that challenge, you also have the legal regulatory challenges because this is a protected area. This is restricted from development. Alberta Heritage and Culture couldn't even really tell us exactly what would have to happen in order for us to get waivers to be allowed to disturb these rocks, because right now really you're not allowed to touch these or do anything with them. And so once twinning is needed through Frank's Slide, it's going to be a really big challenge just going through all the regulatory frameworks to get that approved. So here's the recommended plan. And again, we don't know what kind of hoops are going to have to be jumped through in the future to make this happen, but because of the proximity of CP rail, hold south edge of pavement, widen everything to the north. And you'll see there's the kind of the pinch point with the CP right of way, where there's even a little part of the existing highway pavement that's technically on CP right of way, but don't tell them. So now moving a little ways up the road, this is the current town of Frank. And it's pretty tight. So again, we've got the rail on the south, but then on the north now we have new challenges. We have private frontage, we have people's homes, we have people's driveways, we have businesses. And the right of way here gets down to about 27 meters. And if you'll remember, our twin pavement width is 26.8 meters. So we're really in tight here. So it's kind of private frontage to the left of me, CP rail to the right. Here I am stuck in the middle with not very much space. So shout out to McElhaney here, their 2007 study of the area. Took a look at this problem in Frank and what are we going to do about it? And their solution was, well, ultimately you're going to need a service road for Frank. And so let's make the existing 2-lane highway the service road, build the new 4-lane highway to the south, and completely relocate CPR in the process and just push them further south. And seems like a pretty good idea to me, nice and clean, makes use of the existing infrastructure for a future service road. But once we got into talking with Alberta culture and heritage, it became apparent that this relocation plan might not work. So you can see the red circle there in the bottom of the slide. And that's basically where they think the old town site was and where the bodies are literally buried. And so that's really a no-go area. And, you could try to realign the railway to the south of it, and squeeze the highway, in the existing rail right-of-way. But then you're starting to look at a really long realignment of the rail and, new river crossing structures for the rail, all that kind of thing. And it just started, really spiraling out of control of how long this rail relocation would need to be. And so then we kind of revert back to hold the existing south edge of pavement, widen to the north. So this is the recommended plan in Frank. And it's not great. It takes out that whole first row of properties in Frank. So the gas station, the art gallery, some restaurants, the liquor store, and a number of homes. Alberta Transportation is going to have to acquire those in order to twin the highway through here. So definitely not an ideal solution. It's never the kind of thing you want to have to do, but there's not a lot of options through here. It's very constrained. So let's move on to stage A. And before we really got into this, we just kind of wanted to do one last gut check to make sure that, a realignment around Coleman was absolutely necessary. So let's take a look. It's like, yikes. What the heck are we going to do here? We had 27 meters in Frank. That looks like oodles of space considering what we're looking at here. We've got houses on both sides now, and we're down to just 20 meters. So, we thought, okay, well, maybe we can't get a freeway through Coleman, but maybe we can get an expressway or arterial style twin highway through Coleman. But, even as tight as you can go with 4 lanes, as soon as you start needing left turn lanes at intersections and stuff, it kind of starts taking out both the SO and the run runner, no matter what you do. And not a great end result. And you also have the problem with this chicane. These curves are kind of all under 300 meters in radius, and the tightest one I think is 170. And you could try to straighten them out, but then you're going through a neighborhood, which again, we already did enough of that in Frank. We've had enough. So confirmed, yes, we need a realignment around Coleman. The previous McElhaney study and a couple other studies had confirmed that going to the south is the way to go. There's just too many issues going to the north. So let's see what we can do. This doesn't look too hard. There's one other major constraint though, and that's this big black line is 2 major gas pipelines. And so these are kind of the primary pipelines getting gas out to Vancouver. And so these are big. These are both about 2 meters in diameter. And, you know, that quickly kind of became a do not touch thing. And so what can we do? How can we get a highway through here that does not touch those pipelines? Because touching them would be very regulatorily and logistically expensive and not great for the project. So I came up with 14 different alignments that didn't work and one that kind of did. So pretty much kind of the average of the other two. We tried going as far north and as far south as we could. And we kind of wound up with this one. And, you know, it doesn't touch the pipelines. It stays far enough away from people's homes in Coleman that, you know, hopefully we don't have any problems there. But that's what it looks like. Now, there's a couple major bridges that are required for this alignment. One there at the west end that goes across Pipeline and the river, and one over here in Blairmore, which goes over a local road, the CP rail, and the river. And so the west bridge is about 150 meters long, and the east bridge is about 250 meters long. And so Alberta Transportation definitely wants to avoid building giant bridges right away as much as they can, and that started affecting the staging considerations of this truck route. So here's the cross section. It's kind of a happy medium between what we wound up with for stage C, which was wide open, and stage B, which was very constrained. This is kind of, you know, more in the middle, 15-meter median. It's depressed. It's not, you know, the super wide that you would get if you had all the space in the world, but here we don't. So this is kind of what we could squeeze through on that alignment. And here's the profile. So you'll see it's kind of characterized by a big upgrade and a big downgrade. And that triggered the need for climbing lanes in the initial build-up. So if you only build 2 lanes through here, again, you're just kind of putting a 2-lane highway around Coleman, and the level of service won't be a whole lot better. So in order to allow people to get around slow-moving vehicles, which there are lots on 4% grades like that, you need climbing lanes. And so you can see there is a short stretch where you even need climbing lanes in both directions. So you kind of have to build the full twinned highway anyway, and it wouldn't really make a lot of sense to, you know, build a 2-lane highway with climbing lanes on each side that then you'd have to remove and rebuild separated when you fully twin the bypass. So that led to interesting cross sections. So this is one where it's like, if you need westbound climbing lanes, you have your 2 lanes westbound, and then you have your median, and then you build most of the eastbound carriageway, but only build it wide enough for 1 lane of traffic, and no throwaway pavement in the future. You know, it doesn't really involve any kind of interim grading. It's just kind of a nice, clean way to stage this portion of the highway. And you could even get to, depending on kind of how things are determined once this is built, you could wind up with a 2-lane divided cross section, which I think would be pretty neat. So here's the wildlife mitigation plan. You know, I think the ultimate build out of this is going to look a whole lot like driving through Banff National Park. Lots of overpasses and underpasses for wildlife, and wildlife fencing on both sides of the highway for, you know, most of the entire corridor. And that will get those animal vehicle collisions down a lot. So So the one local landmark that I haven't touched on yet is the Burmis Tree. This thing is 1,000 years old, they say. It doesn't look a day over 650, if you ask me. And it's so popular with the locals, it even has its own brand of beer, which was the official libation of the Highway 3 project. Lastly, just wanted to mention Feroz Kara. He was the project manager for Alberta Transportation for this project. And this was kind of his going out party. It was his last project, and once it was finished, he retired. And that was earlier this year, and we just found out a couple weeks ago that he's now passed away. And so we just wanted to offer our condolences to his family and wish them all the best. And you know, these photos were taken in just October of last year, and everyone in the photo is smiling because the project's over, and the local council liked the plan and are happy with everything that we did. So thank you for listening to the presentation, and I'm looking forward to all of your awesome questions.
Awesome, and some tough questions, Jack. Thank you very much, Alana and Jack, for your presentation. We will now have Q&A. For those of you wondering who this was behind the Institute of Transportation Engineers, this is Madhuri Sierra from the City of Calgary.
Okay, so getting a question from Tony Churchill. Did you consider narrower lane shoulders in Frank to be consistent with lower speeds where people are presumably still crossing the highway? Thanks for your kind words on Feroz there, Tony, as well. So the short answer is we did kind of look at ways we could, narrow the highway and stuff. We looked at, can we jam a one-way service road in there and stuff? And, we did look at, what you could do. But ultimately, Alberta Transportation, wanted the consistent, high-speed design through there. And, there is, the interim management is for access is, an intersection or two intersections in Frank. But then ultimately those will be closed. There'll be an interchange built further south. And so there won't be any, legal anyway, people crossing the highway and stuff. But definitely in the interim, it would be a lower speed thing. And so that's, maybe something they can look at. But even if you, try to reduce your cross section, as much as you can to get 4 lanes through there, as I said, I mean, it's a real challenge to make that work.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Good presentation. It was great.
Thanks. Okay, and Max got a question about the high winds. How is that incorporated into the design other than the median? Nothing is really kind of coming to mind. Alana, was there anything you can think of?
In the ultimate plan, some of the interchange configurations of not necessarily always being perpendicular. So we did look at some of the angles of some of the bridges and just what the winds might do with vehicles and where the prevailing winds were. I don't know that it influenced the end plan in a great deal, but we did take a look at it in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. In stage A, why did you use a 12 to one side slope versus the 6 to 1 on the eastern segments? Was there 12 to 1 on there? I thought it was all 6 to 1. There might have been a typo on the thing, but the cross section should all be 6 to 1. That's what all of AT's cross sections kind of want now for side slopes on any high speed facility. Okay. Paul asks, is there a contingency plan for the narrow median with high tension cable barrier if the tension in the system is lost? That's a great question, Paul. Mostly, that's kind of accommodated by just having like the 6 meter median. I'll say that like whenever I'm kind of driving the Okanagan Special on Highway 97 in BC, they have they don't have the concrete barrier everywhere, and so there's lots of places where they just kind of have like a flush 2.6 meter median, and like that makes a huge difference. Like you wouldn't think, because it's maybe half a lane width basically. It doesn't look like a whole lot, but it really does make a difference just for like headlight glare and stuff from oncoming traffic. So I mean, it's not like catching you, but it is giving you kind of extra buffer space and extra, I guess, forgiveness, for lack of a better word, for that. So I think having 6 meters is going to feel like an ocean of pavement if you're driving through there. So even if the barrier is kind of being knocked out, as I mean, we see that a lot on Highway 2 getting up to the Edmonton Airport there every winter. I think even kind of in that situation, I think you'll still be relatively okay, but it's definitely like a huge maintenance piece. But that's kind of what we got from the maintenance crews in the area. We'd much rather have high tension cable barrier and have to do more maintenance on it rather than having to plow snowdrifts and stuff from the median barrier. So let's see what else we have. And Tony just making a comment about the 2+1 and even low tension. The barrier can offer some kind of support and attenuation of errant vehicles. So that's good. Okay, Carrie says, I saw a few cross sections with 4.8 meter lane widths. So the 4.8 meter lane width is mostly just it's just where the kind of the single lane carriageway, and so that's basically the standard cross section for an Alberta transportation interchange ramp, and just the wider lane with the shoulders allows you to get around like a disabled vehicle or something, so that if someone breaks down driving kind of in that one lane carriageway, then you can still get around them. It doesn't shut down the whole thing. So that's where the 4.8. So that's just an interim condition, and ultimately that would be kind of widened out to 2 3.7 meter lanes. Is there any ongoing regulatory clearance work underway for the construction through Frank's Slide? Thanks for the question there, Calvin. Basically, no. I mean, there's not it's not really a high kind of priority for AT right away to kind of do a lot of work through there. It's definitely one of the busier portions of the highway. But when we started this project back in 2017, AT was really thinking about kind of building stage A, the kind of the bypass around Coleman. They were really planning on doing that, as soon as we were done this functional planning study, and that's obviously changed a little bit. They just need a whole whack of funding to get any of that off the ground. But I think, once you're kind of done that, then stage B starts being the real pinch point for volume capacity and stuff. I mean, you saw there, they're kind of up to 10,000 vehicles a day already. But there's no kind of imminent construction plan for that area.
Yeah, I might just add that, we did get a full schedule of requirements from Culture throughout the planning study. I think we got it in the summer of 2019. And it needs everything, right? So it's a pretty hefty dollar value in order to complete the HRIAs. And we were not even directed to kind of put a budget together to sort that out. We do have some placeholders in the cost estimate for our best guess of what some of that may cost for mitigation, but we didn't explore the total construction dollar value for the investigation components of the HRIAs.
Yeah, and I mean, no matter what the regulatory hurdles are, I mean, as I said, the logistics of just kind of moving that much rock and stuff is not really a standard construction, bid item. So who knows how they're going to have to do it. Question from Adrian. What was the input feedback from the residents about the functional plan? Alana, you want to touch on that?
Mixed, I would say, is the short answer, like most projects, right? We had 4 full rounds of public engagement through this project, and they had a bit of engagement fatigue because it's been studied for many decades and the need is there. And so I think some of the feedback, we had separate landowner meetings with all of the residents that were impacted through Frank and any of the other businesses that were very well attended. And I'd say many people understood why the recommended plan is what it is, and that we did do as much of our due diligence and then some, even for looking at alternatives to avoid them. So that was kind of how we approached it. And the public engagement, in the end, all of the municipalities and municipal councils approved the plan for Alberta transportation, which was something that had not been previously accomplished. So we do feel that the residents, you know, that reluctantly agree with moving forward kind of approach in the end.
Yeah, and I'll say that kind of, you know, a large chunk of the kind of negative feedback from residents was to do with kind of the future access management of, like, you know, each place, you know, each town or whatever has currently, you know, maybe 2 or 3 accesses, and then it's kind of going down to 1 when we build an interchange there. But I mean, again, that's a long way off, and, you know, the access management was really I would say the biggest source of friction, rather than, you know, because for the most part, I mean, the highway's, you know, staying where it is, it's just getting wider. So.
And I think, like many projects in other jurisdictions too, like just knowing what the plan is was a sense of relief for many residents. Just know that they can plan forward with exactly whether it's access management or a full acquisition of their properties, but how they can move forward with their individual lives and business plans and those kinds of things.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions here. I think we've exhausted our feed for questions. Any other last questions?
I'll echo the note that I see Peter wrote about nice to see John and Al. Your pictures are up on my screen too. Thanks, Tony. I know. I have kid art on my wall. I could have shown that too, but. All right, Madri, we can turn it back over to you for closing. It looks like we're maybe through questions. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks everyone for attending.